Hello and welcome. This is Mouse Gunner, and we're back with some more from the depths, and we'll be looking at yet another propulsion method available to us in the game From the Depths. And this time around, we'll be looking at rotor blades. Now, you might be looking at the ship and say, well, that's the exact same ship you've been using in all your other videos, and a large part it is, but there is something that's very different about this ship that I'll be showing off a little bit later. But let's go ahead and look at the rotor blades and what they're all about, and I'll go ahead and change the HUD here so you can actually see it, so that we can kind of look at some things. So pretty much I have the control layout here shown over in the upper left corner, and I'm using a spin block controller to do this. Essentially what you do is you just lay out a bunch of spin blocks, and you put on these what they're called helicopter blades on them, and then you use a spin block controller after you've set up how you want the spin blocks to spin, and you can get everything to work. So the way I have everything set up, if I hit the T key, the rotor in the back starts to move, and we start to move forward. And you can see our speed. If I crank this thing all the way up, you see that this thing's actually quite fast. Gets up to almost 10 meters per second. Of course, there's bobbing and everything that is going to slow you down every once in a while. Now, if I go ahead and hit the I or Y key, I will turn the ship to the right, and Y will turn the ship to the left. Now, as you can see, this turns pretty sharply if I get it max power. But let's go ahead and turn everything off. Now, there's two other controls that you might see on that layout, is U and J, and if we look on the bottom of the ship, you'll notice that there are a couple other rotor blades that we haven't yet used, and the question might be forming in your mind, what are they for? Well, if we look up a little bit higher, I've been kind of hiding this from you, we find that there are balloons. Now, if you notice one thing that was missing from this ship when I look down here, there's no longer a keel. Normally, I'd have a number of lead blocks forming a keel to keep the ship stable if it was just a true ship. But this isn't just a purely water-going ship. This is an airship as well. So we use the balloons as stabilization and replacement of that keel. If I were to have the keel, the lead blocks are heavy, and that would limit the balloon's ability to lift it to make it an airship. But the balloons are necessary because without them, you would have no forces keeping the craft stable on the water, and it would just topple over. So that is an important factor. But let's go ahead and look at the making this an airship and getting it up in the air. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into my body, and I have a button here that allows me to quick toggle all the balloons to inflate. So let's go ahead and do that. We hold in the Q key, and then we use this this menu system here to do balloons and hit deploy. Then we hit Q to exit, and you'll notice all of our balloons start to deploy. So we'll come out here, and the balloons will start to lift us up in the air. Now, you might notice that we're not particularly straight. That's because I actually have more balloons inflated than I probably need. So I'm going to sever some of the ones in the back here. Now, there's no real quick way to do this. You kind of have to do it manually like this, one at a time. But there is the option to quick, with that button, quick deploy or quick sever all of the balloons. But to do things a little bit, one balloon at a time, or to get it more precise how many balloons you want, you kind of have to do it one balloon at a time, I guess is what I was trying to say there. Okay, so now that we're in the air, we can see how this thing performs. So as we discussed, the T key will make us move forward. I'll just do it a little bit of a push forward. Now you might notice right away, the craft is starting to tilt up. Well, this is where we're going to have to redeploy our balloons under acceleration. So you come up here, you take one of the balloons off the nose, and you come back here and you reinflate the back balloons. The reason you do this is it's going to redistribute the weight so that when we accelerate, the forces of acceleration will level the craft out. Ordinarily, if I didn't do that, the rotor blades would push the nose down, and we have countered that by adding more lift to the rear, which is why we have these extra balloons in the back. And then I've also countered that by removing some of the, I'm sorry, I said push nose down, I meant push nose up. So what we've done is we've lifted the back end up to push the nose back down, and we've removed one of the balloons to mitigate some of the lift in the front. But of course, if we slow everything back down, we'll notice that we lean forward. So in a stopped position, you're going to want to resever or get rid of these balloons and then deploy the balloon in front, and it will restabilize. But how this thing moves as far as everything else goes, so T goes forward again. We're not going to go quite full speed. I and Y is going to turn us, so I is to the right and Y is to the left, just as before. Now I'm going to assume if I do this max turn, we're going to have quite a bit of lean going with the craft. But it's not too bad, and I could probably slow down the speed of those rotors to make them not spin quite so fast. But, you know, you can obviously just manually slow it down so it's not quite so tight of a turn. Now, another element to this, though, is the U and J. So those are the bottom rotors, the rotors that are on the bottom of the ship here, and they're orientated. So if I hit U, we'll start to climb. And again, I would have to probably redistribute the balloons here. So let's start cutting the balloons in the rear so we don't flip over. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cut the engines here real quick. We probably should have cut the balloons earlier. But we're going to sever some balloons, and we're going to reinflate this balloon up front. And then we'll go ahead and pressing a little bit of acceleration and hitting that. Now we're a little bit more stable. We're not going to flip over. So this is something, it's a little bit complex on the, you know, having to control everything. And if you look at the altitude, you can see how we're going up. Now, of course, I can increase that. Of course, now we're starting to have a different dynamic where it's trying to flip over the other way. So we have to be kind of mindful of too hard of an acceleration. We kind of have to rebalance the balloons. But you get the idea. And we can use this to climb. Now, the only way to stay at a stable altitude is use the lift of the balloons. We can't truly stay at, you know, 154 meters. Once we turn off the engines, we will start to drop. So that is one element to this, is there's no way to really stay at that upper height. You're always going to stay at pretty much this roughly, I think it's around 97, 96 meters. That the balloons will naturally lift the ship. So we're roughly around 95 to 97 meters naturally. Okay, and of course under acceleration, of course if we have the balloons distributed correctly, we'll also gain a little bit of altitude eventually, depending on how our nose is oriented. So there's a couple different ways to increase our height, but of course with the J key, I can start decreasing our altitude. And we see we're starting to drop. And this is how you would, you know, get back on the water and travel just on the water if you wanted to. Is we just hit the J key here, max down until we're all the way down. Maybe start. There we go. We're now back in the water. And what we would do at this point is we just start cutting some of these balloons so we don't have quite as much lift. And as you can see, this process is a little tedious, but just go back down to essentially the bare minimum of what we need. And then, of course, we cut the engines, and now we're just naturally floating. And we can just use our rotors to power us on the water. So a couple different options here, and of course, at this point, we could, you know, come down, refuel if we needed more supplies of ammunition or fuel or whatever. Now that we're down here, and then when we're ready to go, again, if we want to quick deploy, I would jump back into my body, hit the Q key here, use the menu to deploy the balloons, and then we see that we start floating back up, and we can just immediately start accelerating. So we'll go ahead and cut the front balloons so we get the right distribution for our full acceleration. We just start accelerating. And there you have it. So that's pretty much the idea here. And I could try and do some combat here as well. Let's go ahead and load ourselves in an enemy. I'm not sure how exactly this will work. Airship to water ship. We could do a plane enemy, but I don't know how well this would compete against that. So what we'll do is we'll pop open one of these, a couple of these Sea Vipers, if I remember correctly. These are the kind of the weenie ships. We'll do a few of those, and we'll see if we can try and fight them. So let's see where they spawn in. They're way over there, so we have to go ahead and turn around to meet them. So we'll use our controls here, turn around, and before, the cannons are AI controlled, so the AI will take care of all of that. All right, we don't need to be turning quite so much here, and you can see the speed of this thing is quite good. So I'm going to cut the engines real briefly, and then start up the rotor here, so we can start moving, and we can see the enemy craft down there. And our altitude is a little above 100 meters. I'm not even sure if we'll be able to shoot at them due to the, the angle. But we'll get over there. Okay, we're starting to shoot. And as I said, the AI is taking control of that. So when I need to, I can just focus on the controls of the ship and let the AI take care of the shooting. So that's the main gun firing. Now we're going to start firing our side cannons to get our broadside going. Now, the craft will get pushed a little bit by the recoil of the guns, so I do have to kind of correct for that. But we'll continue to give them broadsides here. And they're pretty much unable to shoot at us. Now, they're pretty small craft, so they're going to be a little bit hard to hit, but we are doing damage to them. And I'm just being very gentle with the Y and I controls to turn us. As far as I can tell, the enemy hasn't been able to shoot at us yet. Now, I think they might have shorter range cannons. We did do a little bit of damage there. If you see over in the upper right corner, that's our us doing damage. That will show up as numbers. So, pretty interesting the way that this works. Now, this craft is obviously vulnerable to damage to its rotor blades as well as its balloons. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Alright, so I think I'm kind of starting to get an angle where I can't really hit them effectively. So I'm going to start kind of turning away. And we'll kind of get some distance here. And yeah, they're not able to reach me at all with their cannons. They're trying. Oh, that one's a high flyer. Is that going to hit? No, it looks like it sailed under us. So this gives us a real advantage over our opponents, is we can fly, they can't. Give ourselves a hard turn here. And we'll cut the engines a little bit and start turning the rotor in the back here a little bit. Start getting some good acceleration. Do a little bit of slight turn here. I'm not going to go full speed now that we're in range. So you kind of get the idea of how this craft works, and I was really thrilled with the way that this craft turned out. I really like the aesthetics of it. You have the smokestacks there, and it really has that nice steampunk vibe going. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This is Mouse Gunner signing out.